So a YouTuber by the name Grappling Ignorance responded to an old Barbarossaa video. A few people asked me what I thought of it, and whose side I took. I'll be honest, I always thought that one video of Barb's was rather weak, and by no means an example of his valuable and inspiring contributions to our movement. I had never heard of Grappling Ignorance up until now. I believe both actually made some good points and not so good points, and I am here to address these and toss in my own 2 cents.
Hey Razor, have you heard about the YouTuber, Grappling Ignorance, that responded to Barbarossaa's old video, Women Ruin Education?
Yeah, I heard it stirred up a bit of a buzz, but I haven't watched the video.
Hey Razor, I think you should watch it and make a response video to this person.
Well, I guess I could. I've been up on a soapbox preaching the death of traditionalism for so long I've all but bored my audience to tears. Maybe poning some punk-ass bitch will give the bloodthirsty alligator pit something to chew on. So who is the girl that started crying over one of Barb's videos?
Actually it's not a girl, and they weren't crying. It's a guy, and he looks kinda tough.
Oh please, these male feminists have wrists as limp as an old man's cock. Put him on the screen, let me see what this pansy has to say. Oh shit, it's the Grim Reaper. Holy Armageddon Batman, I don't know if I am ready to take on death. Barbar, what the fuck did you do to piss off death? See, that's the benefit of being an atheist. I get wonky autistic transgender feminists swinging swords at me in a response video.
Now this is a response to Razorblade Kenny. Right off the bat, that's a fallacy because that's a distortion of Jen's argument that's being bayoneted there. He's doing this!
I get cute as a puppy dog MRAs who respond to me by complimenting me to death. I once got a reply from the Wicked Witch, all pissed off because someone dropped a house on her sister.
MRAs have stooped to new lows. An MRA named Razorblade Candy.
But you get the fucking Grim Reaper after you. Look man, I don't know if I can put up much of a fight against motherfucking Beelzebub. Dude, someone needs to warn me when to stay out of shit when the Prince of Darkness starts poning Migto.
Razor, Beelzebub and the Prince of Darkness are references to Lucifer. The Grim Reaper is a different entity altogether.
But it is Christianity, right?
Well, yes, but the Reaper is referred to as the Angel of Life and Death, also the Angel of Light and Dark. Many religions have a figure that walk between life and death to ferry the living to the afterlife.
What is the difference between Lucifer, Satan, the devil and the beast?
They're all the devil. Lucifer was his name in heaven, Satan was his name in hell, the beast is his name on earth.
Oh, like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, are 3 states of God's being.
Exactly.
Is any of this going to help me fight death?
No, afraid not.
Okay look, I'm going to need some supplies. I'm going to need a gun with silver bullets, some holy water, and body armor.
I don't know about holy water, but I have some Kool-Aid blessed by Stephen Molyneux.
As for body armor, all I have is a tinfoil hat I got for signing up to the Alex Jones fan club.
I don't have silver bullets, but I have these silver earrings, and a slingshot.
Alright death, I'm ready. I got Kool-Aid, tinfoil and earrings. Fuck, we're screwed.
You ever see a video with a really stupid title, so you figure it's probably some form of joke or satire, then you watch it and find out it's really someone's honest opinion? Then you're ready to just laugh it off as something that most who see it would find impossible to take seriously. And you see it has over 26,000 people who have watched it and only 132 disliked it, while over 760 have liked it. Such was the case for me on a video titled, Women Ruin Education.
Why is it that women feel the need to ruin everything they touch? It's a simple question.
No, it's not a simple question. You're not even using it as a question here, you're using it as a claim. The very premise is so outlandish and disagreeable, it's clear you'll have to devote everything else you say here to attempting to validate it. Your premise or claim here is that each woman on the planet feels a need to ruin everything she touches.
He never said every woman, he said women. I think in the context of his statement, and in the rest of the context of this video, he is generalizing about the overall effect of one demographic compared to another demographic. But if you'd rather attack a straw man than the man whose video you're responding to, who am I to question the prerogative of death?
So if you're really looking for an answer to your simple question, it's they don't. Applying nearly any claim ubiquitously to either gender is bound to be false, but I am certainly intrigued by the evidence you have for making such a bold assertion about every woman on earth.
Again, O angel of life and death, he did not say every single woman on earth. No wonder you're so good at boning people. You don't bother to argue what they said, but instead opt to argue what you claim they said. Straw man much? You claim he is applying a ubiquitous claim about women, as in women everywhere. Women ruin everything. Now granted, he did actually say everything. But I think it's pretty obvious to anyone that he is exaggerating. He does not mean women ruin the grass, women ruin the sun, ruin Christmas. Women parasitically leech off of strawberry milkshakes, leech off of ceramic pottery. You know, everything, in the way that the Midas touch turned everything to gold. It's pretty obvious it's an exaggerated statement to indicate that women acting in a parasitic manner is a common theme found in women in general, and not an isolated event, or a female idiosyncrasy confined to one genre, one aspect of life. This would not be different than a woman stating, why do men feel the need to sexualize everything? Obviously not every man, of every part of the world, sexualizes absolutely everything. That clearly is not what this woman would have meant, and you'd have to be an idiot to assume she was being literal. But in a world with My Little Pony porn, I think it's safe to say this woman's exaggerated figurative claim would have some merit. Likewise with Barbarossaa's statement. But again, death, you seem to really have it out for that straw man, so by all means, continue kicking that straw man's ass.
Everything they come into contact with, it's like they immediately get into parasite mode and start to destroy it. And in this case, I'm talking about the school system.
So everything women come into contact with, they become parasites toward an attempt to destroy? That means they would want to sustain themselves off of everything else they contact. So how do you explain the single mothers who were abandoned by their partners and devoted their lives to working tirelessly to support their children independently?
How do you explain the single mothers that are on welfare leeching off of the system? 90% of welfare goes to single-parent mothers, link in the description. How do you explain single-parent mothers who are extorting alimony and child support out of the ex-husband? How do you explain the housewives sitting around watching TV while the kids are at school all day, contributing practically nothing, and is able to maintain this lifestyle by leeching off of her husband? I will not claim all women to be living like this, so long as you do not claim all women to be living the selfless lifestyle you are describing. I can't speak for Barbarossaaaa, who is using exaggerations due to his frustrated mood, but I won't even claim that most women in this day and age, or that most women throughout history have lived a parasitic lifestyle, nor do I have to for the generalization to hold enough merit to be a talking point. All that needs to be accepted is that prospering, surviving, leeching off of someone else, is a trait more commonly found in women than in men. Again, 90% of welfare is paid to single-parent moms, and the 2/3 of child support is paid to mothers, and the great bulk of dependent partners in a marriage are women. Very few men, in relation to women, receive welfare, receive child support from their ex-spouse, or are being supported by their breadwinning spouse. Thus a generalized statement that women are parasitic has merit.
Or those who adopt and raise orphans altruistically, or those who do volunteer work selflessly. How do you explain every working woman in the world who contributes to society, pays taxes, and lives her life no less dependently or parasitically than the average man? Well, by your logic, women come in contact with children, so they should have a parasitic relationship with them, and their jobs.
Parental leave, in America, and in most countries, is almost exclusively taken by women. That's both paid time off and just time off in general, equal pay for less work, on average, more sick leave than men, more money awarded for sexual harassment suits, and hostile work environment lawsuits, than men, more free job training via women's only job training programs, and more acquisition of jobs through corporate gender quotas. I'd say that's an argument for parasitically leeching off of the corporate sector. As for leeching off of their children, there's always the jackpot of child custody. When a man is afforded child custody, he is more often than not expected to pay for those children or be penalized for failing. When women are granted custody, they are often helped out with alimony, child support, and welfare, and typically given the house, and other assets, for the benefit of the child, as a bonus for receiving the children. When women fail to be able to provide, they are helped. When men fail to provide, they are penalized for their failure. On average, men receive the burden of custody, and women receive the jackpot of custody. Due to the way the system works, women fighting tooth and nail to gain custody of their children, possibly doing it only for the jackpot that comes with child custody, would serve as an example of leeching off of their children, in spite of the fact Barbarossaa has not actually specified leeching off of children, and this was your straw man, you still lose. Good God, death, that straw man kicked your ass. That straw man was tired of your shit, and rightfully so, the way you were bullying and attacking him relentlessly. And again, I believe I can speak for Barbar here, am not claiming all women are bad, selfish, evil, or whatever have you, nor am I claiming them all, every one of them, to be parasitic. I am merely stating that when looking at what men put into the system versus women, and what women take from the system versus men, we see an incredible amount of women profiting at the expense of men, and very little of the reverse. This is enough to make the exaggerated metaphor of parasite. By the way, since you're so fond of attacking straw men, why not mention that a parasite must either drink the blood of a host, or live inside of its body, and ask Barbarossaa to provide evidence that women literally drink blood, or live inside of men. Again, you seem to be fond of straw men, so I figured I'd help you out.
And society itself. Are you ready to back off of this clearly flawed claim yet? I can't wait to hear how you explain that women are parasites of education, a field that has historically been largely contributed to by women.
Actually, I am suspicious as to how much teaching women actually did in the history of academia, considering, in America, women were not allowed to teach if she had children, or was married. It is unlikely that women would have taught more than the first few grades, or that they would have taught for a long period of time. This of course does not reflect negatively on women, but more so, on the sexist rules of our society that feared women's independence. And if that actually works out to help your argument, so be it. I figure as much straw man attacking you're doing, if you actually care to address something Barbar said, I might as well help out. Anything to get you to ease up on that poor straw man.
Now, the purpose of this video is to inject a new idea about education into the minds of men who are interested in ending the misandry at all costs. Gender-segregated schools is what I propose.
Separate schools for boys and girls already exist. Not every school at any level is co-ed by default. That's why the word co-ed exists, because some entire schools and colleges and dorms are segregated by gender. I don't mean to burst your bubble, but there are pros and cons to either method, and neither system demonstrates some form of massive, holistic superiority over the other.
Perhaps you are right about massive and holistic. But the advantages of sex-segregated universities would be the lowered occurrence of rape, and false rape, sexual assault, and harassment claims. Perhaps it's due to my involvement in gender politics as a men's rights activist, making me bombarded with the news of college campuses are swarming with occurrences of rape and sexual harassment and the formation and reinforcement of sexual harassment policies, nearly all of which is women as victims, and men as perpetrators. If these claims of rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment are true, then it is in the best interest of women to go to an all-girls school, where they will be safe. If these accusations are false accusations, then it would be in men's best interest to attend an all-men's school, to avoid these false allegations. If half the allegations are true and the other half false, then it would be in the best interest of both men and women to attend separate schools. If the schools are developing zero-tolerance policies, and conducting their own rape trials, as is my understanding, in an effort to lower the amount of lawsuits they get from female students who are unhappy with the school's lack of response to their accusations, is true, then it is in the best interest of future schools to accept only one sex, so that they need not deal with all that crap. If the occurrences of rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment, by report, is nowhere near as significant as feminists are claiming, then I suggest you go bitch at the feminists who are screaming bloody murder and blowing up social media about these events, for making mountains out of molehills. Or you could play it safe, and do what you're good at, and beat the shit out of straw men. Your choice, Beelzebub.
Go on, though.
I call for the complete separation of males and females in the secondary education system, to which we will devote an exactly equal amount of taxpayer dollars. Now, to be realistic, this will most likely not happen, as the feminists would go nuts after hearing that, but hypothetically speaking, let's explore what would happen or what would be the result of the adoption of it.
Well, secondary education is high school. College is post-secondary, which it seems like your follow-up example refers to. I can say one thing you got right is that complete gender segregation at the high school and college levels is probably never going to happen as a mandate throughout the entire country. It's not because feminists would rise up against it either. Most young men and women, including those highly focused on their studies, prefer to attend co-ed schools, which is why they choose to do so.
They prefer to attend co-ed schools, which is why they do so, is a circular argument for motive. I am just going to link to a blog post I have made, explaining the benefits of single-sex schools, which will also have links to the sources. I'll highlight that the findings are, percentage of students scoring proficient on the FCAT, boys in co-ed classes, 37% scored proficient. Girls in co-ed classes, 59% scored proficient. Girls in single-sex classes, 75% scored proficient. Boys in single-sex classes, 86% scored proficient. Boys are also better behaved in all boys' schools. Girls in single-sex schools chose to attend engineering, math, and hard sciences, more than in co-ed, but still not as much as boys in either. It would seem both boys and girls do better in segregated schools. The only detraction to all these studies that show single-sex schools perform better are articles written by and interviews with women's studies professors, who claim the studies are biased, or ultimately inconsistent, etc., all the while making it painfully obvious that their objection is that these schools reinforce gender stereotypes, which echoes Barbarossaa's statement that it would be feminists objecting to sex-segregated schools. Before you claim sampling bias, cognitive bias, etc., read the blog post for greater details.
You're advocating that we remove people's right to a co-ed education and their choice to a co-ed post-secondary education. Also, the education budget is stretched about as thin as it can be right now, with belts tightening annually in most states.
I agree, it doesn't sit right with me either that people ought to have their choices removed. However, as far as it not being in the budget, the solution is simple. Reallocate the budget, quit bombing Arabs for a few days, save that money, and build more schools. If my findings are correct, there is extreme benefit in sex-segregated schools, to the point where it ought to be America's highest priority. Furthermore, feminists insisted that schools make an equal allotment of female sports as male sports, and then demanded equal funding, when the amount of female participants were only a fraction of the male participants, and the audience attendance only a fraction as well. And then initiatives were made to coax higher female sports participation. Schools had to defund male sports, and cancel many male sports, to comply with these regulations. Feminists make demands, they don't care about budget or fairness, and get what they want. You let a men's rights activist attempt the same and all hell breaks loose, mostly by other MRAs with a conscience and a sense of fairness and principle, which is one of the reasons we lose and feminists win. See my video entitled More on Fathers' Rights, and a declaration, for more on this topic.
You're suggesting that we magically build and staff twice as many high schools and colleges just to mandate gender segregation. I can't wait to hear why.
Now, for the past 2 semesters in school, I've noticed more and more females in my chemistry and math classes, and this semester was the first time that I counted an equal number of men and women in my chem class.
Oh, so the data for your proposal is entirely based on your experience this semester in your chemistry lab class. I guess we better alert the Secretary of Education and get the word out that someone who feels all women are destructive parasites has...
Again, back to kicking the shit out of that straw man. What the fuck is with you and straw men? Was your mama raped by a scarecrow? Why do you insist on attacking straw men?
Personally observed something to confirm his own sexist bias. That seems like a reasonable and reliable basis for a mandatory segregation of the entire education system.
So the general behavior of the females throughout the semester were as follows. Every week, we'd have to turn in a lab report, and it was up to each individual student to figure out exactly what the lab report was asking and how to use our lecture notes and whatever else we needed to get it done. So what you saw happen, almost without exception, is that the men got to work on the lab within the next day or two, and they would sit there and do the work and learn. That's right, I said learn. Now, our labs would be due every Thursday before we started next week's labs. So every Wednesday, without fail, almost every single girl in the class would be tracking down their respective manginas to waive the false prospect of the remote possibility that she might actually like said mangina in order to get them to explain bit by bit, piece by piece, everything she had to do, how to write it down, and then they would just end up writing it down for her anyway when she was still too incompetent and lazy to do it for herself. And this happened without fail every single week. Now there were 2 or 3 of us, myself included, that refused to help any women at all, but most of the men carried the women through the course and practically did all the work for them.
When I was in college, the average lab class had about 30 students in it, much smaller than a lecture hall. You said that in this particular semester, the female students reached nearly an equal number to male students, which means that you're calling for a complete gender segregation for the entire country based on the behavior of about 15 young women during one lab class one semester?
Oh come on. Don't tell me you have never heard of this phenomenon. Men offering assistance to women in an effort to gain romantic favor with them is a classic trope. There was a commercial many years back for some software, or website, which claimed to scan your computer for errors and fix everything. Their marketing pitch was to show nerdy guys offering to help girls with their computer problems. But now those poor nerds will go dateless because the pretty girls now have this software which will fix their computer for them. This commercial aired frequently and repetitively for at least a year. It was an old classic trope long before that commercial. What I am saying is, it is not Barbarossaa's personal account of this behavior by which to gauge the accuracy of said occurrence, it is the fact he is giving a testament of a common knowledge occurrence. Men helping women change a flat tire, opening doors for women, carrying their books for them, helping them with their homework, helping them with their computer, offering to help them out with schoolwork, all in an effort to suck up to them and gain romantic favor, is deeply ingrained common knowledge. The reverse is not a common knowledge cliché. Next you go on to claim your academic experience differed. Maybe both of your experiences were different. Maybe they weren't. Maybe he's right. Maybe you're right. Or maybe both of you had a different perception of the same experience, brought on by selective memory and cognitive bias. But the fact that his testimony is in compliance with well-established common knowledge, establishes that his experience alone is not the basis for his proposal. His personal experience is merely a validation of a well-known phenomenon. Point goes to Barbarossaaaa. If you want my advice, death, I suggest you go back to attacking straw men. It seems to be your strong point.
Both will do what you're describing and find other ways to motivate their peers to help them apart from what you're describing. And they do so within their peer groups of the same gender too. I sure hope you have better evidence than this for accusing all women on the planet of being destructive parasites.
That's it. You show that straw man who's boss. He never said all women. In fact, he specifically said the general behavior of the females. General, as in pretty common occurrence, thematic, occurring in significantly higher proportion than was seen in men. One could interpret general as in more common than uncommon throughout the female population of the class, meaning the majority, but majority still isn't, as you put it, every single female. Furthermore, the allegation of females being parasitic, as I have displayed with examples earlier in this video, is not confined to their behavior in academia. Examples of their destructiveness can be seen in the video game industry, where games that show male heroes and male protagonists are vilified by feminists such as Anita Sarkeesian as being examples of misogyny in video games. These feminists' attacks have worked their way inside the industry, inside its internal journalism, and perpetuated by the gamer girl explosion. The development of the video game industry and its culture has had very little to do with women. Everything from the hardware development and evolution, to the gaming concepts, all the good ideas and bad ideas, all the companies that got big or went belly up, all the investment, risks, work, imagination, and consumption was nearly all male. When its popularity peaked, is when women went from scoffing at male gamers, to flooding the industry, and once in the industry, began crying sexism and demanding the entire industry and culture change to suit women. I would call this destructive. Now you can claim not all females entered the industry and culture. You can claim not all those who did, attacked the industry. You can even argue that some women in both the industry and the culture, have fought against these attacks to defend it, and all of this is true. However, the overall effect of female intrusion into it, has in fact hurt it. It has temporarily boosted sales, at the expense of demonizing its culture, and applying pressure to the developers to do away with many of the features that gave the culture and experience its unique and appealing atmosphere. I would call this destructive. I think it is painfully obvious to anyone that this behavior, and its effect, should be labeled as destructive. And again, not all women have to be like that in order for the overall negative effect of female infestation to occur. All of my examples of the video game culture and industry can also be applied to the atheist community, the comic book industry and culture, the tech industry, and others. The theme of an industry being built by the blood, sweat, tears, and dollars of men, only to have it tampered with in a negative and destructive way, by the sudden inclusion of women, at the peak of its popularity, is a common occurrence. This is widely known, widely talked about, and widely understood, among the audience Barbarossaa is speaking to, which is why he felt no need to give a half-hour lecture on non-university examples, which is why he used the exaggerated claim of why do women destroy everything, meaning yet one more industry, culture, function, space, institution, in which the high abundance of women, yields a familiar pattern of negative and destructive traits. I will point out at least one difference between academia and these other areas is that academia has been gender neutral or roughly gender neutral for a significant time, which breaks from the familiar theme of waiting until men take all the chances, do all the work, make all the sacrifices, to build something, and then women flood in at the peak of its popularity and begin redecorating it to make it a safe space for women.
And this is the pseudo-education that many of these women who are graduating into the math and sciences used to proclaim as evidence of their independence. And then you couple this with affirmative action for women, and it becomes apparent real fast that women will employ their sex as a means of obtaining degrees that they simply are not qualified for and have not earned. And this is why I called for gender segregation in universities.
So you feel that many of the women who earned degrees in the fields of math and science actually just had men do all of the work for them in college. Did these men take their exams for them? Did they perform the lab work in front of professors and inspectors for them? Most importantly, what about after the men earned those women's degrees for them? Did they submit their sterling male resumes on behalf of those women? And did they interview for them? If these women are really just pseudo-educated, then once they achieve employment with their degrees in math or science, then how do they keep those jobs if they really don't know any of the material for themselves? Don't you think that would become evident in their work that they...
I could argue that it is evident in their work. There is a pay gap and achievement gap between the sexes. The feminists call it the glass ceiling. Barbarossaa's claim that they are pseudo-educated is an alternative explanation to the theorized institutional discrimination. Affirmative action does a lot to explain why they can have lower performance and still graduate, why they can perform lower at work and yet maintain that job, and even be forced into promotion via affirmative action. I do not claim this to be the undeniable truth, but merely a noteworthy possibility to be considered. You bring up a point that this can only help so much. The girls still have to take tests under conditions where they can't just walk up to a boy and get the answer. They had to have actually memorized the answer, regardless of how you obtain the information. The fact it is held in memory at the time of a test is the method in which we gauge a person's knowledge of the subject. But perhaps by having the answers handed to you on a silver platter, rather than really digging deep for the utmost in-depth understanding of the subject, gives you a more superficial understanding of the subject, thereby validating the statement of pseudo-educated. You claim to be a teacher, so your opinion on how likely this is, and the mechanics of it, would outweigh mine or Barbarossaa's, but I'm just mentioning this possibility, as a consideration.
They don't actually know the things that they were hired with the pretense of knowing? Do you see how everything you're saying here sounds more like conjecture motivated by the absolutist and sexist bias that you started your video by declaring?
Now, you have feminists taking every opportunity to claim that women are surpassing men in education, and women now hold the majority of degrees, so women shouldn't need us incompetent men to hold them back. Let's segregate the school systems.
Just because one demographic is not by and large dependent on another demographic doesn't mean they should be segregated. For example, the Hispanic students in my class could still be academically successful even without the black students in my class.
I think he meant there should be no objection to sex segregation by feminists if they honestly believed higher female academic achievement was completely earned fairly by women, and not earned with the aid of men helping them. At least I think that's what he meant.
Do you see how stupid it would be to conclude from that we should segregate them from each other because of it? As bad as your reasoning was before, it's actually gotten worse by suggesting we remove gender diversity just because we could.
I think this is a straw man. The reason I am not sure is, first off, he stated the reason for gender segregation was to end the parasitism on men by women in academia, a claim which so far is only backed up by his personal account, and the trope of men assisting women for romantic favor. It could be argued this trope is highly exaggerated by media, and thus one man's experience, and popular media, does not a fact make. At any rate, you know his proposal was not we should segregate because we can. I'd call this a straw man. But then you acknowledge that he is using it to make a point about a theorized outcome, so it's a pseudo-straw man. Normally I'd just let it go. But with your affinity for straw men, I'm leaning towards straw man. But seriously, Death, did a fucking scarecrow cheat you at a poker game?
Now, I realize that you're implying something would happen to these women if we did that, but I'll let you explicitly claim that before responding.
Now, what would happen if we had equally funded male-only and female-only universities in the West? Well, what you would see happen within a span of 5 years or so is that the female-only schools would start to inevitably gravitate towards the humanities, and after maybe a decade or so, you would see a complete lack of any engineers, scientists, or doctors, or pretty much any fields that make civilization run, and you would see the male-only schools producing the next generation of scientific intelligentsia. You would see the male-only schools flourishing and the female-only schools stagnant.
Oh, is that what we'd see? And how did you arrive at these figures? How did you determine what would happen in 5, then 10 years? Just kind of pulled those numbers out of thin air, did you? It seems like you haven't paid much attention to the emphasis on credibility for your assertions in those college classes you're taking, have you?
Actually, Death, I'll give you credit, this point goes to you. According to my brief investigation of single-sex schools, females actually do better than in co-ed, and choose science and other so-called masculine subjects more in single-sex than co-ed schools. It can be argued that my brief investigation is not an accurate conclusion, however that would mean removing the best evidence so far for a sex-segregated school.
But let's humor your suggestion that in 1 decade those female schools wouldn't even have math and science programs. So in your proposed system, women wouldn't even have a chance to study advanced math or science eventually.
Again with a straw man, he didn't say a complete lack of. Oh shit, you're right, Barb did actually say complete lack of, rather than a lack of. Okay, you know what, Death, you get this one, he actually did say all, by use of the word complete, in a context that didn't make an obvious figurative exaggeration. You get this one, point goes to Death.
Now with that said, I don't believe this will ever happen, and this is why I'm proposing that men start to wage war on the education system. And by that I mean clandestine recognizance of the math and science curricula. And what I mean by that is that we need to start secretly recording with laptop cameras and other recording devices video lectures of every class of every math and science curricula available in our universities, and then start adapting these lectures to our own curricula. That's right, in order to undermine the feminist universities, we need to start stealing their curricula with the use of recording technology, and we need to send out men that are willing to fight for the gender war and the betterment of men into the women's studies programs and record and post the misandry that's being indoctrinated into the youth.
Let me try to follow what you've said men need to do. 1. Wage war on the education system. I thought you wanted to reform the education system to one that's strictly segregated, but if you want to wage war on something, you do so to destroy, defeat, or conquer it. You seem to think men should secretively record content of science and math classes? Okay, then you said by that you meant secretly recording university lectures of math and science, then adapting them to your own curricula? What? This is already your own curricula. There are classes that you're already in, so why are you advocating for men to start recording these lectures? What's that supposed to accomplish? Isn't the information already available to you, and isn't it already perfectly legal for you to take notes or use a tape recorder during class lectures?
To save time, I am going to skip showing Death's entire reply, and declare that I agree with Death. Secretly taping classes and spreading the information is pointless. If you're in the class, you're already allowed to take notes and record, and you're already exposed to the resources, and if the goal is to share the resources with your fellow man, the resources are already available for free on the internet, and in the libraries before the advent of the internet. Then comes the confusion about whether he is also talking about secretly recording women's studies programs or whether he is talking about all-girls schools, and the Grim Reaper does cover this nicely. As for Barbarossaa's intent of exposing the misandry, I disagree. The misandry is already in plain sight. It's not that no one knows it's there, it's that no one cares. We've already learned to turn a blind eye. The feminist lectures in these classes are often taken out of popular bestsellers, already publicly available and regurgitated ad nauseum by women and feminists all over the internet and in our daily lives. To counter the misandry from women's studies classes and in university, the best bet is to do exactly as people like Victor Zen is doing, pushing to start a men's group at their university, to be persistent in this effort, to learn how these classes work, to learn all the rules of starting a group, to fully understand the internal politics of how these colleges work, and with persistence to get a men's group started, and to challenge against the school's insistence that there already is a men's group. and to do that by demonstrating that the group does not differ from women's studies in the unique way that is meant by our notion of a men's group or men's studies, and to push the reason for such a group, with an honest and positive message that men face unique challenges and obstacles, not governed and properly addressed by the other groups. The LGBT and feminists have a monopoly on gender discussion. We need to break that monopoly, and people like Victor Zen require groups like AVFM to back them up with the power of donations and publicity, as they have. I see the work that AVFM and Victor Zen are doing to help break the women's studies monopoly of gender discussion on college campuses, and believe this is the most effective strategy for ending the misandry at universities. We need more Victor Zens and we need AVFM to grow so that they can better assist the uprising of future Victor Zens, and we need more men's rights organizations like AVFM to have a diversity in men's rights issue priorities that they can fund and publicize, to maximize men's rights projects and efforts in order to make this successful and happen on a national level. We don't need mandated gender-segregated colleges. Providing people with a choice is essential. Right now there are virtually no options for men-only colleges except for religious-centered colleges, nearly all of which are Jewish. Why is it that such an unpopular religion and group of people have more male-only colleges than all other forms of male-only college, religious or secular, is beyond me. If anyone without a swastika tattoo could answer that, it'd be appreciated. The Grim Reaper brings up that colleges have both single-sex and co-ed as an option. However, he didn't bother to list any. I found 3 that were secular, all others being religious, and the great bulk of them being Jewish. Perhaps I am not Googling properly, and am only looking at public, instead of private. I don't know, and haven't time to do any serious investigation. Back to my point, so long as there is an option for single-sex colleges, there is no need to make this a national mandate. Serious research, by people in the upper echelons of the Department of Public Education, needs to be done into the actual academic benefits of sex-segregated schools, and to have the conducting and analyzing of this research as removed as possible from traditionalist conservatives and feminists, who would each push their own agenda, thus tainting the research, and good luck with that. Until then, there is trying to break up the feminist LGBT monopoly on college spaces, by the addition of men's groups.
We must declare war on the learning centers of the West, and we must do it relentlessly. And we have to obtain all their useful knowledge and expose their misandry by the use of recording technology. It's just that simple. And once we've obtained these curricula in math and science, we need to make them available to men and men only. To avoid the legal ramifications, we should never post the actual video that we've taken from these universities, but recreate them, lecture for lecture, and make them available to men. Not women, but men.
What? You're going to take video of class lectures that are apparently only given in female universities, despite your earlier claims that females are scientifically and mathematically inept and rely entirely on men to carry them through such studies. Then, you're going to replicate those lectures and somehow post them to a forum on which you'll be slapping a No Girls Allowed sign? Or does every man get a password emailed to him, or what? How does any of this work?
Point goes to death. The whole concept of recording college lectures as a means to destroy the feminist academic system, or whatever, is pretty silly, and not an example of Barbarossaa's best ideas. I believe Barbarossaa's point was us men have to start watching each other's back, get selfish with our knowledge and abilities, and have that knowledge and ability benefit men, instead of competing against one another to the benefit of women, allowing them to parasitically leech off of men. In a manner of speaking, I see where Barb is coming from. However, it must be pointed out that men offering their time, ability, and knowledge to women, is not bad behavior on the part of women, it is bad behavior on the part of men. It is men who are metaphorically approaching women with a hard-on begging to carry their books, open their doors, buy them something, help them with their work, kick some guy's ass for them, or any other service the queen bees would have us do. This is bad male behavior. The fault lies with males for offering, not with women for accepting. This behavior is gynocentric, and is basically just pussy begging, which is a thing that must be shamed, and stopped. We must not blame women for accepting help when help is offered. We must instead blame the men who are wasting their own time, and depriving his fellow man of help, in effort to gain romantic favor with women. It's similar to the women that broadcast themselves playing video games and get men to donate them money. They get a dozen men donating $5 or $10, and then they get that one guy to donate $100, or a few hundred to her. The fault is not of women who found a good way to make money, it is the fault of men who compete for the attention, approval, love, and affection of women, by throwing money at them. And recording classes and publishing or recreating is not beneficial to anyone in any way because the right and ability and even availability of all this knowledge is already available.
If the only type of job you can find after completing an education in your area of study is the reteaching of that area of study, then it is educationally useless and non-functional. So that means English, humanities, ethnic studies, American and world history, and of course women's studies. Shakespeare will never put a roof over my head, neither will the memorization of any culture or country's history.
That's not true. Not only is it beneficial, but it's essential that you know the works of Shakespeare if you hope to have a career involving creative writing, whether it be books, TV, movies, or theatre. In fact, I believe it is essential in journalism as well. Not only is it useful, but your employer will expect it.
So the only use or function of a branch of education is if it gets you a job apart from teaching it? So none of the people who have learned to speak or write better through English classes were in any way able to apply that to other areas of work or other meaningful areas of their lives? And nothing that enhances an individual's life, like an understanding of sociology or philosophy, has any educational merit? Do you realize that educating a society in things like speaking, reading, history, and the like all contribute to that society? That's why people get paid to teach them. Society values literacy, verbal and written communication, for example. So we pay people to teach our kids how to read, write, and speak properly.
I get where Barb is coming from, that these classes do not translate into immediate job security. But then again, if just getting qualified to do one specific thing is the goal, certification programs may be a better choice than college. However, ultimately, point goes to Beelzebub.
Women's studies is perhaps the most useless field of study ever created, as it perpetuates female entitlement and the unrestrained leeching and parasitism that feminism promotes.
Wouldn't women's studies involve the process by which females have become more independent from their male overseers and made their way to productive membership of modern society?
Would it? Even if we remove all the sexism towards men, the reinforcement of the female identity as eternal victim, all the harmful and erroneous statistics that demonize men, and is echoed throughout the media, even if we removed all the harm to men that feminism and women's studies classes have caused, has women's studies and colleges actually contributed in any significant and meaningful way to the working of women? Seems to me women were fighting tooth and nail for equal opportunity and pay before women's studies was even a thing in college. Are we sure feminism itself isn't taking credit for accomplishments largely achieved by a logical reaction to a changing environment? So many more women are working outside the home. Is this the result of feminism or the result of modern technology doing their housework for them and public schools doing their child rearing for them to the point where they no longer have a purpose in the home? But even if I did accept that women's studies classes are the foundation of these achievements, do you not understand that this is like showing how Hitler's use of fear-mongering, creating unity by distrust of Jews, turned the crippled Germany around into a powerful industrious nation boasting advancements in technology, and a military force that could have rivaled the greatest militaries of Rome? Point is, even if I accepted women's studies as the cause of women's contributions, I cannot declare it good for humanity, simply due to the persecution and fear-mongering it used to accomplish these goals. The means has not justified the ends.
How they've positively influenced the society that oppressed them through their diverse contributions to the arts, sciences, politics, and more? Isn't that quite different from being a parasite?
I'm going to be posting more and more videos with the free time that I have now that finals are over, to lay out a roadmap of how we can undermine Western society and feminism. And that's all I'm really interested in. I'm not interested in making homosexuals feel comfortable in a men's movement that has no teeth, and I'm not interested in brokering a deal with feminists. I'm interested in the destruction of a misandric, racist, and immoral society that needs to fall. That's it.
You've called our society misandric, racist, and immoral, while negatively generalizing every woman on the planet as inferior, lazy, and parasitic, and suggesting that all formal studies of different cultures be banned from our education system. You've titled this video, Women Ruin Education, while explicitly calling for a war on education. Hypocrisy, thy name is you.
And death ends on a snow clone of Shakespeare's, Woman, thy name is frailty. See Barb, I told you Shakespeare kicks ass. So in closing, who won? Well, I think Death and Barbarossaaaa are about tied. The first half of this round was Death doing massive ponage to straw men. Ah yes, Scarecrows tremble before death, and also me polling death. I can't take too much credit, he was busy fucking up straw men. However, near the second half of the video, Death was delivering some hard blows to Barbarossaaaa, and the moral of the story is, if Death knocks on your door, tell him there's a scarecrow talking shit about his mama next door, and promptly run. Perhaps one day I will face Death without Barbarossaaaa and straw men, and have to rely on my own wits for survival, but I shall face this day as a man, not as a coward. Okay, I pissed him off. Everybody run.